The Valley campaigns of 1864 were American Civil War operations and battles that took place in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia from May to October 1864. Military historians divide this period into three separate campaigns, but it is useful to consider the three together and how they interacted. Background: at the beginning of 1864, Ulysses S. Grant was promoted to lieutenant general and given command of all Union armies. He chose to make his headquarters with the Army of the Potomac, although Maj. Gen. George G. Meade remained the actual commander of that army. He left Maj. Gen. William Tecumseh Sherman in command of most of the Western armies. Grant understood the concept of total war and believed, along with Sherman and President Abraham Lincoln, that only the utter defeat of Confederate forces and their economic base would bring an end to the war. Therefore, scorched earth tactics would be required in some important theaters. He devised a coordinated strategy that would strike at the heart of the Confederacy from multiple directions. Grant, Meade, and Maj. Gen. Benjamin Butler against Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia near Richmond. Maj. Gen. Franz Sigel to invade the Shenandoah Valley and destroy Lee's supply lines. Sherman to invade Georgia and capture Atlanta. Maj. Gen. Nathaniel P. Banks to capture Mobile, Alabama. Lynchburg Campaign. The first campaign started with Grant's planned invasion by Sigel. Sigel was in command of the Department of West Virginia, and his orders from Grant were to move up the valley with 10,000 men to destroy the railroad center at Lynchburg, Virginia. New Marquette. Sigel was intercepted by 4,000 troops and cadets from the Virginia Military Institute under Confederate Maj. Gen. John C. Breckinridge and defeated. He retreated to Strasburg, Virginia, and was replaced by Maj. Gen. David Hunter, who later burned VMI in retaliation for the actions of the VMI cadets. Piedmont. Hunter resumed the Union offensive and defeated William E. Grumble Jones, who was killed in the battle. Hunter occupied Staunton, Virginia. On June 11, Hunter fought at Lexington against John McCausland's Confederate cavalry, which withdrew to Buchanan. Hunter ordered Col. Alfred N. Duffy's cavalry division to join him in Lexington and while awaiting their arrival burned former Governor John Letcher's home, as well as shelled and burned the Virginia Military Institute, seizing the statue of George Washington there and nearly destroying the campus. The July 30, 1864, Confederate burning of Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, was a response to the VMI attack. Joined by Duffy on June 13, Hunter sent Averell to drive McCausland out of Buchanan and capture the James River Bridge. But McCausland burned the bridge and fled. Hunter joined Averell in Buchanan on June 14 and on June 15 advanced via the road between the peaks of Otter to occupy Liberty that evening. Meanwhile, Maj. Gen. John C. Breckinridge sent Brig. Gen. John D. Imboden and his cavalry to join McCausland. Breckinridge arrived in Lynchburg the next day. Maj. Gen. Daniel Harvey Hill and Brig. Gen. Harry T. Hayes constructed a defense line in the hills just southwest of the city. When McCausland fell back, he was engaged by the pursuing Averell cavalry in the afternoon skirmish at New London. The Union launched another attack on McCausland and Imboden that evening, and the Confederates retreated from New London. Lynchburg. Hunter was foiled in his plan to destroy railroads, canals, and hospitals in Lynchburg when initial units under Jubilee Early arrived. Hunter, short on supplies, retreated back through West Virginia. Early's Washington raid and operations against the B&O Railroad. Robert E. Lee was concerned about Hunter's advances in the valley, which threatened critical railroad lines and provisions for the Virginia-based Confederate forces. He sent Jubal Early's corps to sweep Union forces from the valley and, if possible, to menace Washington, D.C., hoping to compel Grant to dilute to his forces against Lee around Petersburg, Virginia. Early was operating in the shadow of Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson, whose 1862 Valley Campaign against superior forces was fabled in Confederate history. Early got off to a good start. He drove down the valley without opposition, bypassed Harper's Ferry, crossed the Potomac River, and advanced into Maryland. Grant dispatched a corps under Horatio G. Wright and other troops under George Crook to reinforce Washington and pursue Early. Montgomery Early defeated a smaller force under Lew Wallace near Frederick, Maryland. But this battle delayed his progress enough to allow time for reinforcing the defenses of Washington. Fort Stevens Early attacked a fort on the northwest defensive perimeter of Washington without success and withdrew back to Virginia. Heaton's Crossroads Union cavalry attacked Early's supply trains as the Confederates withdrew across the Loudoun Valley towards the Blue Ridge Mountains. Several small cavalry skirmishes occurred throughout the day as the Federals attempted to harass Early's column. Cool Spring, also known as Snicker's Ferry, Early attacked and repulsed pursuing Union forces under Wright. Rutherford's Farm A Union division attacked a Confederate division under Stephen Dodson Ramseur and routed it. Early withdrew his army south to Fisher's Hill, near Strasburg, Virginia. 2nd Kernstown Wright withdrew, thinking Early was no longer a threat. Early attacked him to prevent or delay his return to Grant's forces besieging Petersburg. Union troops were routed, streaming through the streets of Winchester. Early pursued and burned Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, along the way in retaliation for Hunter's previous destruction in the valley. Folk's Mill, also known as the Battle of Cumberland, an inconclusive small cavalry battle in Maryland. Moorefield, also known as the Battle of Oldfields. Confederate cavalry returning from the Chambersburg burning were ambushed and defeated by Union cavalry. Sheridan's Valley Campaign. Grant finally lost patience with Hunter, particularly his allowing Early to burn Chambersburg, and knew that Washington remained vulnerable if Early was still on the loose. He found a new commander aggressive enough to defeat Early. Philip Sheridan, the cavalry commander of the Army of the Potomac, who was given command of all forces in the area, calling him the Army of the Shenandoah. Sheridan initially started slowly, primarily because the impending presidential election of 1864 demanded a cautious approach, avoiding any disaster that might lead to the defeat of Abraham Lincoln. Guard Hill, also known as Front Royal or Cedarville. Confederate forces under Richard H. Anderson were sent from Petersburg to reinforce Early. Brig. Gen. Wesley Merritt's Union Cavalry Division surprised the Confederate columns while they were crossing the Shenandoah River, capturing about 300. The Confederates rallied and advanced, gradually pushing back Merritt's men to Cedarville. The battle was inconclusive. Summit Point, also known as Flowing Springs or Cameron's Depot. Early and Anderson struck Sheridan near Charlestown, West Virginia. Sheridan conducted a fighting withdrawal. Smithfield crossing two Confederate divisions crossed Opequon Creek and forced a Union cavalry division back to Charlestown. Berryville, a minor engagement in which Early attempted to stop Sheridan's march up the valley. Early withdrew back to Opequon Creek when he realized he was in a poor position for attacking Sheridan's full force. 3rd Winchester, also known as the Battle of Opequon. While Early had his forces dispersed, raiding the B&O Railroad, Sheridan struck near Winchester, Virginia. Fisher's Hill. Sheridan hit Early in an early morning flanking attack, routing the Confederates with moderate losses. Early retreated to Waynesboro, Virginia. With Early damaged and pinned down, the valley lay open to the Union, and because of Sherman's capture of Atlanta, Lincoln's re-election now seemed assured. Sheridan pulled back slowly down the valley and conducted a scorched earth campaign that would presage Sherman's march to the sea in November. The goal was to deny the Confederacy the means of feeding its armies in Virginia, and Sheridan's army did so ruthlessly, burning crops, barns, mills, and factories. Tom's Brook as Early began a pursuit of Sheridan. Union cavalry routed 2 divisions of Confederate cavalry. Cedar Creek in a surprise attack. Early smashed 2/3 of the Union army, but his troops were hungry and exhausted and fell out of their ranks to pillage the Union camp. Sheridan, in a ride from Winchester, managed to rally his troops and utterly rout Early's men, and the Confederates lost everything they had gained in the morning. This victory helped Lincoln get re-elected. Aftermath. After completing his missions of neutralizing Early and suppressing the valley's military-related economy, Sheridan returned to assist Grant at Petersburg. Most of the men of Early's corps rejoined Lee at Petersburg in December, while Early remained to command a skeleton force. His final action was defeat of the Battle of Waynesboro on March 2, 1865, after which Lee removed him from his command because the Confederate government and people had lost confidence in him.